Welcome, viewers, back to the Preaching Humanist with David Oliverio, that is I, where no God is required for a life of love, joy, peace, fulfillment, meaning, and purpose in life. And the good life is one guided by reason and motivated by love. Special day here for me and my grassroots show called the Preaching Humanist. I have Matt Dillahunty with me today. Matt, welcome. Good to have you here.
Easter.
Happy Easter. Yeah. I get that a lot. I'm sure Matt has got that, had that said to him for many, many years. So I'm going to interview Matt today. And before I ask him some questions and let him take off, I want to give you a quick bio of Matt. Matt is definitely a bigger name in the atheist community, and he's known abroad. So those of you watching who have watched my show before know the objectives of my show. And today I'm just going to pick Matt's brain, and we're going to see what he says about some real basic questions that Christians may have. And we're also going to talk to our fellow atheists about certain things as well. So for those of you that do not know Matt, let me give you a quick little bio. And Matt said these are all good, so we're going to do it. Matt is, or has been, the president of ACA, which is the Atheist Community of Austin, from 2006 all the way to 2013. He's a host of the very famous Atheist Experience cable access show since 2005, recorded right here in the studio. He's the founder and contributor of the Counter Apologetics Encyclopedia, Iron Chariots, formerly hosted the live internet radio show Nonprofits. He's regularly engaged in formal debates, and he travels the U.S., speaking to secular organizations and university groups. I am actually very glad that I'm not on the other side. I don't think I'd want to debate Matt Dillahunty. He's a very good debater. So Matt, welcome, and I'm going to start right into it, and we are going to discuss your religious background and your upbringing.
Sure.
So if you would, just kind of tell us your background, how you were raised, and so forth.
Yeah, so my dad's family was Southern Baptist, and my mom's family was kind of a mix. There's a lot of Catholics on that side, but a handful of Protestants. So I was raised in the church. I mean, I was in Sunday school from probably before I could walk. Right. And I was active, but at about the age of 5 or so, I walked down the aisle at the revival and, accepted Jesus into my heart. And a lot of this story I didn't even find out until many years later, and that's that my parents had concerns, can a 5-year-old actually understand this? Yeah. And the preacher basically said, well, you'll find out. And we'll see if this sticks, essentially. And it did, to the extent that I was still active in the church. My mom actually converted most of her immediate family from Catholicism to being Southern Baptists. Wow. And I was active in the church through my teen years. I was never really forced to go to church except Sunday mornings, and I'm not a morning person, and still not. And I didn't like going to church on Sunday morning, but I was there the rest of the time. Sunday night, Monday night visitation, Wednesday night service. There were Thursday night and Friday night youth group things, and weekends and summer camps and all kinds of stuff. In my teen years, I started to become more involved and realized, well, if I'm just now beginning to understand this, then I certainly couldn't have understood it when I was 5. So have I just not been saved all these years? Have I thought wrongly that I had, a proper relationship with Christ? And so my teen years, I did it again, got saved again, or rededicated my life, however you want to look at it. Yeah. And this is something I saw in hindsight among all my peers at church too, where at least within our church, there was almost a cycle of guilt, of you can't ever live up to the expectations. You're a human being. You're going to fail. You're going to have, impure thoughts. You're going to do something wrong. You're not going to be living every second of your life in accordance with what at least the church thinks that you should, to be a good Christian. And so you constantly, there's this, they make you feel guilty, and then you rededicate your life, and then you're on fire for Christ for a little while, and then you slide back a little bit. which is how you get the backslidden thing. And I was convinced that God wanted me to be a preacher, as was my family, but I was terrified of public speaking. I didn't want to do that. And so when I was 18, I, having very few other options, left Missouri and joined the Navy. And I did 8 years in the military, a little over 8 years, and then got out and worked in the tech industry for a few years. Through all of this, I believed, but it wasn't particularly important to me. And then around 2000, 2001 or so, I lost my job, and it was, to me, I felt that God was punishing me. And he was basically saying, you know, I wanted you to do this, and you said no, and you ran off, and you toured the world in the Navy, and you know, engaged in, you know, all sorts of sinful activity, and yeah, you believed and you knew the whole time, but you weren't doing what you were supposed to do, and you focused on your career, and you built your career up, and now I'm going to take it all away from you. And that's kind of the mindset I was in, and it was, okay, God, if you want me to do this, then I will. And there was this period of surrender and a lot of study. With the only goal was to be a better Christian, to be a better representative. In particular, because I had a roommate who was an atheist, and the process of trying to find a way to rationally justify my faith to others, I wound up not believing, and kind of becoming an outspoken atheist.
Wow, that was my next question. What changed your mind about Christianity? Because that's what I like to talk about with other people I interview, and when I debate or talk to Christians, which I do, much like you do, wherever we go, if there's an open door. And they always want to know what was it that changed your mind? Was it some traumatic, terrible event in your life, or did you just come to that your epiphany or to see your logical fallacy?
Yeah, so I wish there was one moment. I wish there was some, you know, but it wasn't anything like that. It was a gradual period of finding out that I didn't have good reasons to believe the things that I thought I did. And once I reached a certain point, it was very rapid after that, how everything fell away. And so I set out to find what would convince an atheist. You know, how do you convince an atheist that Jesus is real? Because the God I believed in was real and obvious as you know, look at the trees. I definitely fell into that camp. And what I found was that the things that I thought were supportive of an obviously existing God were all wrong. They were all fallacious. There was no good reason to think that any of this was true. And then I began to consider, okay, well, maybe I believe, maybe there's a God, but I just can't buy into this Christianity thing. You know, I know too much now about how the Bible came together, about the immoral teachings that are in there, the support of slavery and other things. And I had a lot of problems with this idea of, you know, salvation, punishment, sin. How can you wound a God? You know, how can you offend? And if God is the creator who created everything, and he has a plan and he knows what's going to happen, then did he pick the world in which my roommate became an atheist and damned him to hell? Or is there a hell? And so as I went through all this, it became obvious that I couldn't identify as a Christian, but maybe some other religion was correct. And so I wanted to go and explore other religions to see maybe I found the wrong one. And I had to realize, I came to realize fairly quickly that it's possible that they're all wrong. And there's too much to research. You know, I joke that after I left Christianity, I started researching Buddhism and other religions that have reincarnation to find out if I would have multiple lifetimes to do this research. But eventually I went back and asked, okay, let's try to direct this search. So let's dig into philosophy. Let's dig into logical reasoning. Let's figure out what kind of God could possibly exist to help me figure out which of these religions to focus on, because I can't research them all in depth. And let's also take a look at what sort of things should be convincing. You know, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. So I need standards that allow me to determine whether or not my belief is reasonable. So let's use those to figure out which category of religion could possibly be reasonable. And as it turns out, there wasn't any path to confirm the supernatural in any way.
Right.
And until that exists, no religion that makes an appeal to the supernatural can have a sound justification for belief.
And they can't demonstrate it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Demonstrative power, like in the 1 Kings 18, where Elijah stood against the 450 prophets of Baal. I just spoke on this a couple episodes ago, and how they used demonstrative power to prove that their deity existed.
Oh, yeah.
When you tell a Christian that, or a believer today in any religion, they just say, "No, I can't do that. Don't be silly."
It's amazing how miraculous demonstrations of the power of the gods has declined directly in opposition to our ability to investigate and confirm them.
Exactly.
You know, back when there wasn't video cameras, when everything was word of mouth stories, all of a sudden you had pillars of fire, pillars of cloud, manna from heaven, people rising from the dead, the lame can walk, and now it's Jesus help me find my car keys. You know,
or I just feel Jesus in my heart. Or life transformation, a new creation in Christ. I'm a different person, but they're not thinking, because people change and their lives are transformed based on whatever philosophy they get into. You can conform.
That transformation is probably one of it's come up several times in recent shows where somebody will say, but the reason I believe is because there are so many people who, after giving their life to Christ, have become different people. So what? All you're really saying is, after people made a decision to change to be somebody else, they became somebody else. And that is true whether it was trying to be more Christ-like, or adhering to the Quran, or Scientology, or anything else, or just deciding, I want to live my life differently. This is now important to me. And we hear a lot about sobriety. These people, they were incapable of handling this themselves. It's one of the reasons why I have such a huge problem with the 12-step programs, because they begin with an acknowledgement that you are powerless. Well, you're not powerless. And I don't buy into this idea that we should reinforce powerlessness. Instead, what we find in secular sobriety organizations is that if you begin by empowering people and letting them know that, yes, you can change your life. You don't have to do it on your own. You have support networks. You have people that care about you.
People helping people.
That's as effective or more effective.
Of course. Yeah. Very good. I want to kind of change the topic here. Let's discuss anti-theism. And those of you, my viewers, remember the episode a few months ago. I spoke on anti-theism, why I oppose religions and supernatural belief systems. So anti-theism, I guess a good definition would be an active or conscious opposition to theism. And I will say, with great redundancy, that I'm not anti-people, anti-Christian. I'm anti-Christianity or the religion. We actually care for people. We have a lot of empathy and sympathy, and we're just trying to help people.
Yeah, if we didn't care for people, why would we bother trying to change their mind?
Exactly.
If I thought that a particular religious group, that the people were stupid and beyond hope, and I didn't care about them, I would spend zero time trying to convince them of why I don't think they should believe what they believe. And it's because I care about people, because I have enough respect for not how they think or how they can think. People ask me early on, "Are you mad at your parents and your preachers for?" No. They were as much a victim of this religious indoctrination and flawed thinking as anybody else. And it's not, I'm careful to say, I don't want to make it look like I pity them in the sense of, oh, you poor thing. I don't want to be condescending about it. But where I see religions have poisoned people's mind, where they haven't been given the tools to think rationally about something, that is pitiable. I mean, and I mean it in the sense of, let's see if we can't change that, because I think people are better than the God they believe in. People generally don't support the things that are in the Bible or the Quran in many cases. So I think they're more moral. I also think they're more intelligent, because if you look at the character of these ancient gods, they're not reasonable. They are megalomaniacal. It's the story of the Exodus, which didn't happen. I mean, there's no, not only are there no good reasons to think it did, there are good reasons to think it didn't.
Right.
But you have a God who, hey, I want to free my people from slavery. And Pharaoh is ready to let them go after a demonstration of power, and God then hardens Pharaoh's heart because he's not done showing off.
Yeah.
No. Oh, you want to let him go now? Not yet. I've got 9 more plagues to do.
Yeah.
And it does this after each of the plagues. This is not a demonstration of compassion. It's not a demonstration of reasonableness. And the grand irony of this is that he's not opposed to slavery, the fundamental problem of enslaving human beings. He just doesn't want his chosen people to be enslaved.
Exactly.
It's okay for them to have slaves, just not okay for them to be slaves. Right. And when you start looking through all of this, the God that people believe in isn't the one that's described in the book.
Yes.
And the people who do believe in the God that's described in the book tend to be the extremists that everybody else wants to reject. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, oh, Jesus says sell all your belongings and give the money to the poor. Who does that? Mm-hmm. That's socialism.
Yeah.
We can't have that.
Yeah. What's in the words of Jesus?
So the deal with anti-theism is that this label's got a couple different uses.
Okay.
The way you're using it is closer to what Hitchens did when he referred to anti-theism as an opposition to religion. Okay. I tend to use it much more literally, where anti-theism is an opposition to theism, and anti-religionism or anti-religion is an opposition to the religions. And I only make that, and not everybody agrees, or that usage isn't. So you have, within atheism, you have soft atheism, or weak atheism and strong atheism. Yeah. And weak is, I don't believe a God exists, and strong is, I believe that there are no gods. Yeah. And so I tend to use atheist for the weak position and anti-theist for the strong position, because I can actively believe that gods don't exist, and that still doesn't tell you what I think about particular religious doctrines, because there are aspects of different religious doctrines that I'm still fine with. Right. Hey, don't kill people.
Yeah.
I didn't need any God to tell me that.
Exactly.
And I wish he'd been a lot more specific than, thou shalt not kill, which is kind of vague. I mean, if you look at like the U.S. Penal Code for the different ways that somebody could kill somebody and how they fit within the law, it's a little more robust than these Bronze Age myths.
Right.
But there are plenty of things within religion that are religions that I think are good. What I'm opposed to is unsupported claims, superstition and supernatural claims that can't meet their burden of proof, and the use of those to encourage divisiveness and anything that would be in opposition to humanism. Good. I said before that if there is a God and he's not a humanist, I don't want anything to do with him. And why would anybody else? If he's not actively working in your best interest, and it does no good to say, it may not seem like God is working for your good, but he is. You can't see that because you can't see as far as God. Well, when I was in Australia and I gave a talk about, that's like being dragged through the forest by a giant. Yeah. The giant can see where he wants you to go, and so he's dragging you through the forest. And meanwhile, you're getting banged up on all these trees and everything else. And just to say, don't worry, I'm taking you to safety, doesn't do anything if you're bloodied and battered and dead when you actually get there. Yeah. Wouldn't it be better to pick me up on your shoulder so that I can see where you want me to go, and I can say, yeah, let's go there, or I don't think that's where I want to go. Why do you get to decide what's best for me? And the horrific way that I get from A to B.
Good, great. I'll tell you, some of the opposition that I get, Matt, you probably get this too. There's some debate within our community of the atheist community, whether or not to use the term atheist, secularist, humanist. So I call my show the Preaching Humanist, even though, I guess in a Dawkins scale of a 1 to 7, those of you watching, I've talked about this before, a Dawkins scale, Richard Dawkins, of course, a 1 being you're absolutely sure there's a God, and a 7 on the scale being you're absolutely sure there's no God. I guess I would say I'm at least a 6.8 to 6.9 on the Dawkins scale, because people like Matt and I have pretty much been there or done that in the ministry before, raised in fundamentalist Christianity, involved in these things. But yeah, strong atheist, but also a humanist.
Yep.
I build upon my atheism. What do we do with atheism? It's atheism. So we build into that progressive philosophy of life, right? Being good without a God. So why don't you, let's talk about that and discuss the importance of humanism as well as atheism.
Yeah, I'm probably where you're at on a Dawkins scale too, although I have strong objections to the Dawkins scale, not because it's named after Dawkins, but because it makes the mistake of trying to assess two different positions. There is a God, there is not a God. Those are different propositions. So you either believe or you don't believe.
Yeah.
And then the rest is a confidence level. And you might be incredibly not confident that there is a God, but that doesn't mean that you're incredibly confident that there is not one.
Okay.
But on the humanist front, I'm a skeptic first. Mm-hmm. Because skepticism and critical thinking inform how I go about evaluating things to determine whether or not it's reasonable for me to accept a claim. Mm-hmm. Because of that, I'm an atheist. The God claims don't meet their burden of proof. In many cases, they can be disproved or at least violate the logical laws and reasoning. You end up with circular arguments and claims where what they claim about a God is inconsistent with what we observe. My humanism is more important to me than my atheism. I don't know that it's more important to me than my skepticism. I'd probably put them on par. One is about, maybe skepticism slightly more important, because one is about how you make decisions about everything. And my humanism is an ideology about what I think about human interactions, about what's in our best interest. And I think that the reason skepticism has to take priority over that even is because we have to acknowledge that we may have things that we put into the humanist category, positions, which could be wrong. There are things we could be wrong about. And so skepticism is the foundation. Humanism is a secondary thing. This is more of the ideology.
Right.
And then atheism is just a simple conclusion that I've reached on the existence of God. And antitheism, the opposition to religion as you're using it, is another conclusion I've reached that actually couples my lack of belief and my humanism. And the reason it is derived from those two is because as a humanist, I am interested in things that benefit humans. Right. That create a better world, that allow us to make decisions that are in our own best interest. And we don't want anybody to confuse humanism with hedonism. It's not like we're just, let's run around and have a party, because we can understand that that's probably not in our best interest in many cases.
Yes, of course.
And so that is kind of the path: skepticism, humanism, atheism. Because if a God shows up tomorrow and demonstrates conclusively that he exists, I'll believe, and I'll stop being an atheist. But that doesn't mean I'll worship that God or admire that God or anything else. That depends on what his views are on humanism, or whether he can convince me that I'm wrong about those things. And my humanist views aren't something that I think you could really show are wrong. I mean, I don't suspect that there's any good way to do that. The idea that individual autonomy, freedom and liberty, the sanctity of each individual's mind, the process of using the best evidence and arguments to reach the conclusions that are most rational. There are some subtle little things, like, for example, the question often comes up, if you had cancer, would you want to know about it? Well, that's clearly a personal thing. There are people who would say, yes, absolutely, I want to know. I'm one of those people. I want to know as much as I can about everything, because I think that's how I make better decisions. Knowing that I have cancer and, that helps me get the best treatment to perhaps live the longest, but it also changes how I'm going to view each coming day. And there are other people who would rather not know. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that, because the aspects that they've chosen as most important for their life, they're free to do that. And so when I stand in oppositions to religions, it's quite often when they begin to encroach on individual liberties, the idea of sin and thought crime, that you could think something that would be evil, is kind of bizarre to me because it's the actions and the consequences of the actions that we evaluate. And so when I hear God only wants what's best for you, like we were talking about earlier, okay, I've heard you say that. How do I know that you're right? And where is this God coming to tell me that he wants what's best for me? And where's the demonstration that what he wants is in fact what's best for me?
Right.
Now, humanism, there's no pretension that we now have the answers to everything and we're going to get everything right because we're humanists.
Right.
It's just a recognition that as far as we can tell, we're in this together and without any justification to appeal to supernatural help or guidance. And so the best thing that you and I can do is say, okay, these are the things that I like, these are the things that you like. Where they don't overlap at all may be fine. You know, we don't have to all have the same interest. But where we do overlap, that's where humanism really takes charge, because we're sharing space. And what people believe informs their actions. And their actions they have consequences for themselves and for everybody else. So when people are trying to say, well, that's just your opinion, or you don't get to enforce or push your views on anybody else, I agree that I don't get to push my views on anybody else. But it's not just a matter of opinion about what is right for us when we're sharing space. We get a voice in that.
Good. Do you think atheists should evangelize Christians? This is debatable among the atheist community.
No, it's not.
You don't think?
Well, I mean, you can debate anything.
Oh, of course, but I do have some fellow atheists that are close friends of mine. They're not angry at me for being. Remember, I used to be I'm a former Christian evangelist, so I'm kind of wired that way. It's genetic. My father, and then of course my kids. But I think when I run into certain atheists and tell them that I engage in conversation and dialogue with Christians, because I am trying to help them to change their mind, and I look at them the same way I used to look at Christians when I was a young Christian preacher. I look at them and I literally want to help them. I have compassion on them. I want them to see the light of reason, not the Matthew 5, let your light so shine. Right. I want them to see the light of enlightenment, of thinking and rationality rather than religion. So expound on that.
So the reason I don't think it's debatable, I mean, you can debate anything. You can debate creationism versus evolution. Right. But I don't really think that's debatable. I don't think that the opposition has anything remotely good to put forth. Because when I talk about evangelizing on behalf of, and I typically evangelize on behalf of skepticism and humanism and not atheism.
Okay.
It's about giving them the tools to evaluate and come to a better understanding about reality, and then encouraging the sort of compassion and empathy and recognition that we have to solve our problems on our own. When I advocate for evangelizing that, I'm not talking about going door to door.
Right.
I'm not talking about marching into somebody's church and being a disruption. I'm talking about actively engaging in conversation with the result of either convincing them that they don't have good reasons to believe, or allowing them to convince you that you do, or that they do. To me, to say that evangelizing on behalf of skepticism, humanism, atheism is somehow a non-starter, shouldn't happen, is to say, I have my beliefs, you have yours, we can't have any discussion about it. That, to me, exacerbates the situation, because most theists that I interact with don't have a good understanding of what they believe or why.
Right.
This is something that is the result of indoctrination or sloppy thinking or feelings and impressions. I've seen so much. I've seen God's powerful work in there. Yeah. And the questions you need to ask are, okay, you've seen things. I don't deny that you've seen things. But you've reached conclusions about what you saw, and that's what I'm questioning. How did you determine, for example, you prayed and somebody got better?
Yeah.
How did you determine that the prayer had anything at all to do with it? Where's that connection?
Yeah.
That sort of Socratic method of asking questions and having the conversation is the only way that people are likely to change their mind.
Okay.
Because if you set up this barrier where we can't talk or shouldn't talk, then what you're essentially doing is saying, you stay with your stuff, I'll stay with mine.
Right. Right.
it's less likely that people are going to change their mind, and it is more likely that it's going to lead to more harm. When you have people who are anti-science, anti-vaccination, anti-doctors, we're not going to take our kids to the hospital, we're just going to pray over them, and that kid ends up dead, which happens over and over again. I saw news stories about parents, I think they've killed 2 children that way. To say that it was more moral to not interact with them than to take the opportunity to try to convince them that what they were doing was potentially harmful, I think is as immoral as what they're doing.
Right.
And I remember like an NPR episode, I think it was This I Believe with Penn Jillette, where he talked about when people proselytize to them, he's not offended or bothered by that, because if you actually believed somebody was getting ready to die and go to hell, what kind of ass would you have to be to not want to tell them that?
Exactly.
And so if I look around and see people in the world who are credulous, who are making appeals to the supernatural, who are refusing medical treatment, who are trying to institute legislation that dramatically affects the lives of other people who don't share their religious beliefs, and I don't say anything about it, then I feel that I'm complicit. And the only thing it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. The don't proselytize on behalf of atheists is basically saying, yes, good men should do nothing, or good people should do nothing. I can't abide by that.
Okay. I like to say that most Christians I'd run into, Matt, and you probably experience the same thing, are very surprised that, for example, when I'm out with the Atheists Helping the Homeless, that wonderful organization here in Austin, where we meet under the bridge and we pass out food and clothing, and we do philanthropic work as humanists and atheists. Many Christians are very, very surprised that we're doing good deeds and we have the goodness and kindness in us, and it's a great opportunity for me and my big mouth to have dialogue with Christians out there. I love to do that. But I'm not surprised anymore, after doing this for over 20 years, that Christians are very, very surprised to see that atheists can be very kind and loving. I'm not saying all atheists are. To me, there are good and bad people in every group.
Yes.
I'm not asserting that just because you're an atheist, it makes you a moral, ethical person. But what I'm saying is, I think within each group, whether you're a believer, whatever religion, you can be a good or a bad person. But I like to say, Matt, and you can interject on this, if we don't tell them, those of us kind of in the front lines, those of us that like to engage in dialogue with believers of any religion or supernatural belief system, if we don't tell them that there are those people that, or you can be good without a God, there is an alternative to your religion, your supernatural belief systems, because some of these people, we don't know that they may already have these doubts in their mind. That's the way I look at it. And some of my fellow atheists, my friends, will say, well, David, you're just wasting your time. They're never going to change. I changed. You changed. And who's to say I wouldn't?
Waste of time?
Yeah.
And by the way, it's your time to waste.
Yeah.
If you are wasting time. But it's not a waste of time. I hear from people all the time, you're never going to change the mind. You're never going to get to the faith heads. Well, I've been doing a TV show for over a decade, and I have an email inbox that has thousands of messages from people whose minds have been changed because of what we've done on the show. And when I go out to conventions or debates, if there's more than 100 to 200 people there's probably a dozen that are going to come up and be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for what you guys did on the show, because I was a fundamentalist Christian, or I was a Muslim, or I was a Scientologist, or whatever. Now, Atheists Helping the Homeless, I just saw there's a chapter that's opened in New York as well.
Oh, wow.
So this is an idea that's actually is spreading, and I'm very happy for all that. When it comes to this idea of Christian perceptions of, well, anything, you're going to get a lot of different perceptions because there's many different types of Christians. But the Christian perception of atheist is probably the reason that we need outspoken atheists and outspoken humanists, because they have a lot of misinformation, and some of it is incredibly easy to expose. So Psalm 14:1, where the fool has said in his heart that there is no God, everybody knows that part. The second half of the verse specifically says they can do no good
No
thing.
good. No man can do any good.
Now, you'll get all kinds of apologetics about, hey, nobody's good, we're all sinners, Jesus came to say, so that's what that means. But I don't think that's what Psalm 1 means. Psalm 14:1 means. I think when it says they can do no good thing, that is, especially after the fool has said in his heart, this is specifically an admonishment of the atheists that these are evil people.
Yeah. Right.
Then you have Protestants who go to Romans and say that God has written his moral code on their heart. So, for example, I had a conversation with a family member right after they found out that I was an atheist, and I was concerned that they would think that I couldn't be a good person. But they already knew me, so they knew I was a good person.
Right.
And they're like, well, of course you can be good.
Right. After that.
You don't have to believe to be good. You just have to have a God for there to be anything good. So you get different models. One is that atheists can't be good. One is that they can, but they're only good because either God wrote the moral code on their heart, or they're not truly good. They're just acting good so that they can get along in this world, because if you act terrible in this world, there's consequences. And then the third one is, yes, you can be good because there's a God, but that's separate from whether you believe it. I don't know how it doesn't register with them that the acknowledgement that you can be good just in order to get along in this world also happens to be sufficient grounds to have a moral system. That the facts of this world, of getting along in this world, mean that there are some things that are going to affect you negatively and others that are going to affect you positively. And if you run around being terrible to people, you're not going to do very well. And we don't need a God to instill a moral code or anything else. It could be there's no such thing as altruism, and that everything is ultimately selfish. Like even when I donate to a worthy cause, I might be doing it for recognition.
Yeah.
What if I donate to a worthy cause and nobody knows? I still know.
Yeah.
And I have this understanding that if I'm taking this action, and other people are too, that giving money to this encourages this sort of behavior, and the world is ultimately better because of it. And if the world gets better, I benefit from that. So you could say that all of my motivations are selfish, and they would still be good. And potentially great.
Yeah.
Because if all I want is to have the best world for me, I still have to make decisions that lead to that best world. And since I don't know if I'm going to live for another year, another 10 years, another 50 years, which now we're starting to push it, but it's in my interest to think longer term and to act in the short term, kind of like Gandhi's think globally, act locally type thing. And when Christians see this and they seem surprised that atheists can do good, I've asked them, well, you don't think atheists can be good? And every one of them will say, well, yeah, of course you can. But.
There's always the but.
And the but gets back to, you're not really good, or you're not good in the way that we think God would have you be good, but you can do good things. Okay, then explain to me why Psalms 14:1 says that I can't do a good thing.
Exactly.
And that's when you get into the apologetics of, well, that doesn't really mean that you're incapable of doing good. That would be absurd. I'm glad you think it's absurd.
But they still think that the goodness that we have comes from the moral capital.
Yes.
You know, that moral
You're
capital.
borrowing from their
We're
worldview.
borrowing. I've had, I mentioned this on one of my episodes before, a girl that I was having a dialogue with, she's a Christian. And she said, well, of course you can be good, but your goodness, being a humanist and atheist, is from, you've hijacked it or stolen it from Christianity.
How does she know that Christianity didn't hijack these traits of humanity that existed and codify them and get some of them wrong? Because if you want to say that we're hijacking the good aspects of religion, then you need to look at the entire book and the entirety of religion and say, here's 100 things that we all agree are good, which happen to be in your book. Here's 50 things that we think are evil. You and I both agree are evil, that are in your book and advocated. And neither one of us support those. So I'm not borrowing from your worldview. We happen to agree on some things that are fundamental to the nature of being human beings sharing space on this planet. And your book advocates for slavery or misogyny or any number of other things that you don't agree with. So of all the people who are picking and choosing from your book, it would seem that you are. Because you've picked out the things you agreed with, got rid of the things you don't agree with, or explained them away.
Right.
I didn't have to know about your book, read your book, or go into it at all to pick out this idea that perhaps it works better for me to try to be kind to someone, to offer assistance to someone. I didn't need a God to tell me that it's wrong to kill people.
Right.
All I needed was a desire to live and the recognition that I have to share space with other people. And that automatically gets you to, it's better if you and I agree that we're not going to kill each other,
Right.
and get a bunch of other people together who agree that we're not going to kill each other, and work together to make sure that we instill this value in other people and take action against those who oppose it.
Good.
That's it. That's all you need.
Yeah.
The foundations of morality, and I gave a whole talk about the superiority of secular morality, about how secular moral systems have the goal of getting better at getting better.
Yeah.
They don't make appeals to the supernatural or divine authorities. They only appeal to the facts about reality. And all you need are some simple, and ultimately they could be arbitrary, foundational views. Because if you believe that life is generally preferable to death,
Right.
generally, we're just going to use it as a general rule, and health is generally preferable to sickness. Well, now you've got two pillars, which we'll acknowledge could be wrong. Maybe death is preferable to life. I don't think so, but we can at least begin there. If you started with death is preferable to life, you might find that you go extinct really quickly. And since extinction is clearly not in our best interest, or at least it would seem that it's not, because you're not here to have anything good, we can go with that life is preferable to death. Then ultimately somebody comes back and says, but what if you're so sick and in such pain in the quality of your life that death becomes preferable to life? Then in that situation, death is preferable to life, and that's why I'm fine with death with dignity. I'm fine with assisted suicide, but I also think that we have a responsibility to make sure that we are actually considering cases where, yes, the quality of this person's life is terrible and there is no hope of improvement in a terminal case.
Excuse me, that gets into situational ethics
Yes.
too, doesn't it?
I think that there are absolute morals only in the sense that for any specific situation, there's a finite set of actions and some subset represents the best possible actions. But I don't think that is absolute for that situation. I am fully an advocate for situational ethics. That you can't just make simple things like thou shalt not kill. So if we understand that thou shalt not kill is not particularly robust, it doesn't really tell us anything useful. It is simply just a command not to kill. And what we've learned is that there are occasions where killing might be necessary, situations where it may actually be the best possible thing. Then obviously the God who said thou shalt not kill is wrong. That it's oversimplified. But it gets worse than that when you go to the Bible, because you have thou shalt not kill and then specific instructions to run around killing people.
Numbers 31 and all the others,
And so what you have, and I'm fine with the idea that you have a general rule and then a specific rule that overrides it, or an older rule and a newer rule that overrides it. That's the way amendments and things work. But to just say thou shalt not kill tells me nothing that I didn't already know. That's not almost, I wouldn't say it's part of like genetic memory, but it's almost intuitive. I don't want to die. Probably best if I discouraged people from killing people, because that keeps me alive and it keeps the people I care about.
Too. I mean, we've learned that as a species. 200,000 years now, I think, prior to religions and Christianity.
I did a talk show, a podcast with this guy just a month or so ago, and he was a Christian. He was confused about a number of things. He was very conspiracy theory minded. And he spent a lot of time talking about one world government. And I completely blew his mind when I said that I don't think that a one world government's necessarily a bad thing. He was like, what? How can you stomach putting so much power in one place? And I was like, wait a minute. I didn't say I put all power in one place. I still believe in governments derived from the people. This idea that there's me and the government as separate things is false. At least in the United States, where we are part of the government. We are part of the process. We can run for office. Now, maybe it's practically impossible for me to get elected to any high office now. I get that. But I don't. The people who are terrified of the New World Order and the one world government, they seem to be forgetting that we have a one nation government with a one state government underneath it, with a one county government or principality government beneath it. That you could have a tiered system where everybody is participating, where you have proper checks and balances, and still have it govern the entire world. And by breaking down borders to where we recognize that the tribe of our tribalism is humanity.
Yes.
I don't see that is, not only do I not see that that's a bad thing, I think it's a good thing. Is there any guarantee that we'll do it right? No.
No.
None at all. Is there a guarantee that we're more likely to do it right if we begin with a humanist model than a religious model?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
My country is the world, my race is human, my religion is to do good. Yeah. I want to end it in just a few minutes here, but I do want to talk about, or go ahead and let's talk about your future endeavors and what's going on with you and your activism. And I do appreciate all you do, by the way, and I think we in the atheist community should be encouraging one another because we all have our gifts. Like we used to say in the Christian circles, the 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the gift of the Spirit. But we are genetically different. We have different abilities. So that's called the division of labor, which I try to explain to my Christian viewers, that we don't need a God for that. We all have different abilities. But Matt's involved with many, many activism movements and things in the atheist community. So kind of tell my viewers what's going on with what you're doing. I know you're even writing can I talk about your book?
I'm working on a book because I get asked that all the time, but so for 10 years I've been hosting the Atheist Experience Show. It's a live call-in show, so that's a lot of conversations. They don't always go well. I'm not always the best person for a particular call. I have been arrogant and dismissive on occasion, and I have been accused of having the patience of a saint on other occasions. The number of times, basically pick out a week, and depending on how the calls go, somebody might say, oh, I believe in God now because you have so much patience, or I don't know how you can do this, or you were a complete jerk to this caller. And these are, I've taken the feedback and consider it. My primary goal is to get results. My primary goal is to have the sort of conversation that encourages people to question what they believe, to think about why they might believe it. And so I'm going to continue doing the TV show, The Atheist Experience, but about almost 2 years ago, I lost my software job. And everybody was like, you should do atheism full time. And I had to remind them that there's not really money in doing that. It's not like Campus Crusade for Christ has this massive mega millions budget, which dwarfs all atheist organizations combined. And that's just one, campus group. But I've been working on the Atheist Debates Project, which is about I create videos that teach people how to understand the sort of arguments and topics. It's not just, here's the ontological argument, here's the teleological argument. There's a lot of things with regard to the conversations that we're going to have. And it's basically like a brain dump for me. This is how I think about these things after years of doing the show. If they turn out to be beneficial to people, great. If not, then I'm sorry, but hopefully they've pointed you in a direction where you can get more assistance. I'm working on a book called If I Were God, which takes a slightly different approach at addressing the questions that we talk about a lot. And my hope is that the book is accessible and interesting for both theists and atheists.
Yes.
If I were God, why would I create anything in the first place? If I decided to do this, what would my reasons be? How would I interact with my creation? Would I interact at all? What would I expect of them? What would I be hoping to gain out of this? And all the questions that we ask in different ways and see, does the world make sense under any of the proposed answers? Is there any complete answer that really makes sense with what we witness? And I'm hoping to start a new show that is I'm shooting it probably 30 minutes with me and I'm going to start with preachers, if I can get them to agree.
Wow, I'm getting excited now.
Just a 30-minute conversation with me and some believer, not just random person from a church, but somebody who's a preacher, somebody who's an evangelist, an apologist. Have a conversation about what they believe and why, and what I think about that, and vice versa. What are their views on atheists? Maybe 30 minutes. And
a formal debate?
No, not. Now, I love formal debates.
Yeah.
I do a lot of them.
Yeah, you do.
And they're my favorite thing, provided they're done right. I don't like so the debate structure that we end up using most of the time comes from scored competition debates. You have opening, second opening, rebuttal. It just becomes, to take a statement from the West Wing, a joint press conference.
Right.
Where neither one of us actually needed to show up. We could have written our statements and sent them in, and then the only thing that we'd need to work on the fly is like a rebuttal and a closing. I want debates that are more conversational, where you present your position and I present my position, and then we have a discussion, a complete cross-examination where the time belongs to the person who's asking the questions, because that allows you to interrupt without being rude. So if I ask you a question, I can now, it's my time, I can interrupt you.
Okay.
And if I'm doing it to keep you from making a good point, then we trust that the audience can see that.
Right.
And if I'm doing that to keep you from derailing the conversation down a rabbit hole, then we trust that they can see that. Okay. And having those kind of conversations, getting feedback from the audience so that it is more of a discussion than a debate, but still a debate, not just butting heads, not just a phone call where somebody like me can hang up on somebody, which I do. And people are like, oh, you can't be for real discussions because you hang up on people.
Well, not often. You don't do that often. I've watched it.
It depends.
Yeah.
I try to make sure that people get as good as they give on the show. And if you are only calling in to preach, you can call in some other show and do that.
Right.
And if you make an argument and it's a rebuttal is offered and you offer no acknowledgement of it, you instead go on to your next point, now you're not having an honest conversation. And we have 6 phone lines now on the TV show. There's always somebody waiting to get in, and that's the problem. It's the benefit and the problem of doing a TV show like The Atheist Experience. You're trying to get information out. You're trying to have discussions.
Right.
And I've had phone calls that lasted 45 minutes. And I've had phone calls that lasted a couple seconds. So the host is always in this position of trying to make a determination.
Right.
But going forward, I want to do more debates. I want to keep working on the Atheist Debates Project. And I'm working with a number of different organizations to address issues within the atheist community. I'm on the board of directors for American Atheists, but apart from that, I'm not tied to any organization. And there are lots of questions that come up, how much should we focus on issues beyond the God question? What sort of intersectionality issues should we use? Should we be supportive of feminism? Should we use that label? Do we have positions on other issues? And how do we do a better job of making sure that the atheist community is a community where people are not only welcome, but encouraged to participate, regardless of their race, their gender identity, any number of issues, so that we build a more cohesive community. And this is difficult because we don't all agree on everything, and we're not going to.
And we're free thinkers. We form opinions based on reason.
And there are a lot of people who are coming out of churches who don't want anything to do with organizations. They don't want to donate money. They don't want to go to anything that even feels remotely like a church.
Like a church,
And that's sad in a sense because churches co-opted aspects of what makes us human.
Yes.
We are communal creatures. We live in the interactions with each other. We cooperate to do things. Sadness from being segregated and alone and compartmentalized away from everybody else is one of the biggest issues. It's one of the reasons people don't leave religions because they might lose their entire support network. If we don't have something similar to that, then we have failed. And that's the type of thing that I'm going to continue supporting moving forward.
I think that's beautiful. There is a lack of that in the atheist community.
We're getting better.
Yes.
There was no community.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of old bearded white guys talking trash about religion for many, many years.
Yeah.
And now we're getting to where there are organizations like Recovering from Religion that help people deal with this process. There's the Secular Therapist Project, and also individual therapists like Dr. Marlene Winnell, who coined the term religious trauma syndrome. Because while some of your viewers may not get this at all, I grew up in a very loving Christian family. There was no trauma for me coming out of it. There was an awakening, a recognition of this. But other people, not all religion is practiced in the same way.
Yeah.
And I hear from kids who have been thrown out of their homes, cut off from their families. And when I tell my mom hears about stuff like that, her response is, well, that doesn't seem very Christ-like to me. That's not very loving. We're going to love you no matter what.
Yeah.
Even if we think you are working for Satan and leading people to hell, we are still going to love you because that's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
Not everybody is the same way. And so there are people who find themselves having in a position where they've lost everything. I hear from people all the time, I'm the only atheist in my town.
Yeah.
No, you're not.
You're not.
You're not even close to the only
Yeah.
And sometimes I hear it from people in towns where there are 2 or 3 or more atheist groups, secular organizations. And so communicating this, getting the word out to people, and building places where everybody can come.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to agree on everything. You don't have to necessarily agree on every political thing. But if you are a secular person, if you are a non-believer, if you are in advocating for coming to humanist organizations, if you want the social structure, you have Sunday Assembly and Oasis and other things. All of these things should be welcome. We shouldn't let religions get away with taking the best elements of who we are and claiming that they are exclusively theirs.
Yeah, and they get credit for that.
Because they're
not.
They
take credit,
One of the biggest problem is one of perception. Religions have had a privileged status in the United States and in the world for thousands of years. Where they have a tax-free status, they have loads of money, they have an incentive for people to donate, and they do plenty of good things. They build hospitals, although the hospitals are pretty profitable. They help the homeless, which we're also doing with atheists helping the homeless. They have a number of these resources that they think all come from God. And from what I see, the reality is that you have good people doing good things. Some of them are giving credit to their religion, and the religions are happily accepting that credit on behalf of their God. And some of us say you can remove that step entirely, do good things, take credit, don't. Either way, do good things.
Exactly. Very good. Yeah, I could go on and on with Matt today, but I think we're going to close right now. And I just want to say one thing. I appreciate all the work that you've done in the atheist community, your debates, and I think it's very, very beneficial, especially for people that are new to being an atheist. You can watch the Atheist Experience podcast. I guess that's what it's called. I know a lot of new atheists need to find answers. They need to find different communities of free thinkers and atheists and humanists and secularists. But the Atheist Experience is a very good place to find information. So thank you for all that you do.
Sure, thank you.
And your other cohorts. I can name a lot of other people that do what Matt does. And we need to provide information. So there are those of us that do believe in giving information to Christians and also to fellow atheists. And as I always say, Christians will never know that you can be good without a God. They will never know that life goes beyond, or can go beyond, mythological concepts like any other, like Christianity or other religions. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to offer believers a way out, and you can progress in life without supernatural beliefs, and there is an alternative to Christianity. So thank you once again for coming on my show and giving a wonderful interview. So thank you for watching my show, The Preaching Humanist with David Oliverio. We will see you next time.